the cloud. I'll go ahead and mute everybody, but I hope that you will. Just before I mute everybody, Bill Moore, would you lead us in a prayer?
Absolutely. Please join with me in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this opportunity that we have to come together to study your word through the power of the internet, Lord. We thank you so much for having Kerry, who's going to lead this lesson, and we ask that you be with him and guide his words. Help us also, too, to open our hearts and minds to the message that you'll be providing for us. In the name of your Son, Jesus, we ask these things. Amen.
Amen. All right, now mute all. If you want to comment, just in case I don't see you, just unmute and speak. So we're in chapter 30, verse 25, and this is the second part of two brides for Jacob. And if you remember the last time, Jacob travels to Padan Aram to find a wife for his own family and to avoid Esau because he deceived Isaac and stole Esau's blessing. I mean, we could go on and on about whether he deserved the blessing. We certainly know God wanted to bless him and wanted to use him. And we know that he told Rebecca that at his birth, that he would be over his brother. But what he did was deceptive, and now Esau wants to kill him. And so he goes to Padan Aram. Isaac sends him there to find a wife because they don't want him to take a Canaanite wife or a Hittite wife like Esau did, and it made it very difficult for Rebekah and for Isaac and Jacob. So Jacob goes there. You remember the whole story. The spark between Jacob and Rachel, and Jacob agrees to work for Laban for 7 years in return for Rachel. So he works the 7 years, and now he's ready to have his wife, and he takes her in the tent, and it turns out to be Leah, the older daughter of Laban. So Laban deceives Jacob. A lot of deception going on. And we see that it actually is true in the patriarchs. If you know, the lies Abraham told and Isaac told, and then the deception of Jacob and Esau, and then the deception of Laban and Jacob, and it's going to go further here. So we see a lot of that goes on. So Laban deceives Jacob now and gives him Leah instead of Rachel. So he also gets Leah's servant, Zilpah. So Jacob marries Rachel and works another 7 years, and with Rachel comes Bilhah. So now Jacob has two wives, Leah and Rachel, and two maids, Zilpah and Bilhah. And through Rachel, Leah, Zilpah, and Bilhah, Jacob has 11 sons and a daughter. And we talked about that whole competition that went on between the two sisters, and even to the point of giving their maids to Jacob, which was frequently customary in that time, to bear children for them. And so that takes place, and all in all, he ends up with 11 sons and a daughter, which is pretty good for a very short period of time. So now Jacob decides to leave Padan Aram, and that's what we're going to be looking at today in chapter 30, 25 to 43. So I'm going to look first of all at 25 to 30. As soon as Rachel had borne Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me away that I may go to my own home and country. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, that I may go, for you know the service that I have given you." But Laban said to him, "If I have found favor in your sight, I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. Name your wages, and I will give it." Jacob said to himself, "You yourself know how I have served you, and how your livestock has fared with me. For you had little before I came, and it has increased abundantly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I turned. But now when shall I provide for my own household also?" So it looks like Laban has gotten 14 years of service out of Jacob, and has benefited from all of his work and from the blessing that God had given Jacob, and yet he has no flock of his own, according to verse 30. He's not a young man. He wasn't a young man really when he came, and he needs to provide for his own family. He now has a large family and nothing to show for his time there other than his family. So Jacob makes an agreement in verses 31 to 36 to work for Laban. He said, "What shall I give you?" Jacob said, "You shall not give me anything. If you will do this for me, I will again pasture your flock and keep it. Let me pass through all your flock today, removing from it every speckled and spotted sheep, and every black lamb, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and they shall be my wages. So my honesty will answer for me later when you come to look into my wages with you. Every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and blacks among the lambs, if found with me, shall be counted stolen." Laban said, "Good, let it be as you have said." But that day, here's this constant deception that goes on between them. And there's another thing here. There doesn't seem to be any trust between Laban and Jacob, and they have worked together for 40 or 14 years, and Jacob is his son-in-law, but they don't trust each other at all. That day Laban removed the male goats that were striped and spotted, and all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, every one that had white on it, and every lamb that was black, and put them in charge of his sons. And he set a distance of 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob pastured the rest of Laban's flock. What it looks like is going on here is, well, first of all, before the thing can even get started, Laban takes all the spotted and speckled ones. But what it appears that he's doing, and when I was reading on this, is that the speckled and spotted ones were genetically more likely to produce speckled and spotted ones. And so he thought that in doing that, he would reduce the number that Jacob would get. So then Jacob decides to try something. And that's in verse 37, starting in verse 37 to 43. Then Jacob took fresh sticks of poplar and almond and plane trees and peeled white strips in them, exposing the white of the sticks. He set the sticks that he had peeled in front of the flock in the troughs, that is, the watering places where the flocks came to drink. And since they bred when they came to drink, the flocks bred in front of the sticks, and so the flocks brought forth striped, speckled, and spotted. And Jacob separated the lambs and set the faces of the flocks toward the striped, and all the black in the flock of Laban. He put his own droves apart and did not put them with Laban's flocks. Whenever the stronger of the flock were breeding, Jacob would lay the sticks in the troughs before the eyes of the flock, that they might breed among the sticks. But for the feebler of the flock, he would not lay them there. So the feebler would be Laban's and the stronger Jacob's. Thus the men increased greatly and had large flocks, female servants and male servants, and camels and donkeys. Okay, now I'm not a sheep breeder. I did a lot of reading on this because I had actually heard in Bible classes in the past that if you do this, if they are mating in front of these speckled sticks that have dark and white, that they will breed speckled and spotted offspring. It didn't make sense to me, but I remember hearing it in Bible classes, and they were saying, "Oh, yeah, it's been proven." So I did a lot of reading on this. As nearly as I can see, there's nothing to that, okay? I heard several different things, but none of them discounted. Every explanation included God working in a providential way to make this happen, which I think we all accept, that God works. Now, some people think that there's something that God used what he knows and that man doesn't know to bring it about. And I don't know that we'll ever have the answer to that. So there were several explanations that I read for how this happened, but none of them believed it could have happened without some kind of supernatural involvement by God. And the key here, anyway, is not really what really is not how this happens. The fact is that God is blessing Jacob, that God is prospering Jacob at Laban's expense. Laban has clearly taken advantage of him for 14 years. And so he has become rich because of Laban, or because of Jacob. Jacob has nothing, and God steps in and uses what Jacob is doing. And we read a little bit when he talks to his wives. I think he will see the answer to the question, because he gives the credit to God for what takes place, not to some scientific knowledge of breeding that he has or his years of vast experience. But the important thing is he is breeding, he is being prospered at Laban's expense now. And he is breeding the stronger in this way rather than the weaker, so that the stronger of the flock are going to end up being speckled and spotted and colored, and he'll be able to put them with his. And it'll be the weaker ones that will be a solid color, and they will go into Laban's flock. That's his plan, and it's God's work that's taking place that allows it to happen. So in chapter 31, when we get over to chapter 31, there we are. First 21 verses, Jacob is going to leave Laban's employ. He doesn't leave sort of through the front door. He decides to slip away. Jacob hears from the sons of Laban in verse 1 of chapter 31. Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and from what was our father's he has gained all this wealth. And Jacob saw that Laban did not regard him with favor as before. See, I'm not looking back and seeing when Laban really regarded him with a lot of favor, but he was clearly happy to have him there because he was prospering because of Jacob. Then the Lord said to Jacob, "Return to the land of your fathers and to your kindred, and I will be with you." So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah into the field where his flock was. And he said to them, now here's where he explains what took place to his wives. I see that your father does not regard me with favor as he did before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have served your father with all my strength. Yet your father has cheated me and changed my wage 10 times, but God did not permit him to harm me. If he said the spotted shall be your wages, then all the flock bore spotted. And if he said the striped shall be your wages, then all the flock bore striped. Thus God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. Now clearly here, Jacob doesn't claim any knowledge or anything special. Jacob just claims it's God, that God did it. Verse 10, he says, in the breeding season of the flock, I lifted up my eyes and saw in a dream that the goats that mated with the flock were striped, spotted, and mottled. Then the angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob? And I said, here I am. And he said, lift up your eyes and see, all the goats that mate with the flock are striped, spotted, and mottled. For I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and made a vow to me. Now arise, go out from this land and return to the land of your kindred. Then Rachel and Leah answered and said to them, is there any portion or inheritance left to us in our father's house? Are we not regarded to him as foreigners? For he has sold us, and he has indeed devoured our money. All the wealth that God has taken away from our father belongs to us and to our children. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do. So Jacob arose and set his sons and his wives on camels, and he drove away all his livestock, all his property that he had gained, the livestock in his possession that he had acquired and paid in Aram, to go to the land of Canaan to his father Isaac. Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel stole her father's household gods. And Jacob tricked Laban the Aramean by not telling him that he intended to flee. He fled with all that he had and arose and crossed the Euphrates and set his face toward the hill country of Gilead. This story, actually from the time Abraham came on the scene, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, appears to be one deception after the other. Everybody is trying to pull one over on everyone else. Laban is trying to cheat Jacob, and then Jacob is trying to get back what he lost. And then, not that he was doing what God told him, but he's trying to get back what he lost, and now he sneaks away and tricks him and doesn't tell him. This is the kind of relationship that they have. So he flees. I like Rachel and Leah's answer, and they definitely have left their father and mother and cleaved to their husband. They're not, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but they're not loyal to their father over their husband. They've seen what took place, and they realize the shrewdness of their father, and they have decided to put their lot with Jacob and his God. So they said, whatever your God tells you, you do it. And they're ready to leave. So he puts them on these camels, and he flees, and he's on his way to Gilead. So Jacob is going to hear about it, and Jacob is not going to be, Laban, I'm sorry, Laban's not going to be very happy, and he's kind of set this up for a confrontation between Jacob and Laban. And this confrontation might have been different had God not intervened. And so God does intervene, and it I think changes the outcome of their discussion. Verse 22, When it was told Laban on the third day that Jacob had fled, he took his kinsman with him, and he pursued him for 7 days and followed close after him into the hill country of Gilead. But God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream by night and said to him, "Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad." This is what I was talking about, God intervening. Laban is clearly hot. He grabs his men, his kinsmen, and he flees or goes after him towards the country of Gilead. He's serious about this because he pursued him for 7 days. But God speaks to Laban and says, don't say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. And Laban overtook Jacob. Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country, and Laban with his kinsmen pitched tents in the hill country of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done that you have tricked me and driven away my daughters like captives of the sword? Why did you flee secretly and trick me and did not tell me, so that I might have sent you away with mirth and songs, with tambourine and lyre? And why did you not permit me to kiss my sons and my daughters farewell? Now you have done foolishly." So is there anybody that really thinks that he's upset because he couldn't have a party? You think that that's really what this is about? What this is about is Laban has lost a lot of the wealth that he gained by having Jacob with him. He became wealthy because of Jacob, and he wanted to continue to take advantage of Jacob, and God didn't allow it. And so God took back what was Jacob's and gave it to him. And now Laban is angry. And so his excuse is that he didn't get to have a party with his daughters and kiss them goodbye, and celebrate with them. So he says in verse 29, "It is in my power to do you harm, but the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, 'Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad.'" It's interesting, though clearly these people are better than the Canaanites or the Hittites or any of those people, and that's why he's sent back here. And yet Laban calls him the God of your father, who spoke to me last night. And he's going to make a point about his gods being stolen. So clearly he is still worshiping other gods. And then in verse 30, "And now you have gone away because you longed greatly for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods?" Jacob answered and said to Laban, "Because I was afraid, for I thought that you would take your daughters from me by force. Anyone with whom you find your gods shall not live. In the presence of our kinsmen, point out what I have that is yours and take it." Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. So Laban went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent and into the tent of the 2 female servants, but he did not find them. And he went out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's. Now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them in the camel's saddle and sat on them. Laban felt all about the tent, but did not find them. And she said to her father, "Let not my lord be angry that I cannot rise before you, for the way of women is upon me." So he searched, but did not find the household gods. Then Jacob became angry and berated Laban. Jacob said to Laban, "What is my offense? What is my sin that you have hotly pursued me? If you have felt all through my goods, what have you found of all your household goods? Set it here before my kinsmen and your kinsmen, that they may decide between us two." These 20 years I've been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried, and I've not eaten the rams of your flock. What was torn by wild beasts I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it myself. From my hand you required it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. There I was by day the heat consumed me, and the cold by night, and my sleep fled from my eyes. I'm going to stop here just for a minute. If you were in our service this morning, we talked about the 23rd Psalm, and he gives a pretty good description here of what of what would be the life of a shepherd, and what a shepherd would have to go through to take care of a flock. He's working for someone. So if anything is lost, if anything is stolen, or anything is eaten by an animal, he bears the loss of it himself, the one working for him. He works in the heat of the day, the cold of the night, and he doesn't get very much sleep. And in verse 41, he says, these 20 years I've been in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been on my side, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God saw my affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked you last night. I love Laban's answer. Laban answers and says to Jacob, the daughters are my daughters, the children are my children, the flocks are my flocks, and all that you see is not mine. But what can I do this day for these my daughters, or for their children whom they have borne? So he's still claiming everything is his. All the flocks are his, the daughters, the grandchildren, they're all his. Even though he gave those daughters to Jacob for 14 years of service, he still claims it's all his. But he determines in verse 44, he says, come now, let us make a covenant, you and I. Let it be a witness between you and me. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. Jacob said to his kinsmen, gather stones, and they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jegar Sahadutha, but Jacob called it Gilead. Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me today. Therefore he named it Gilead. And Mizpah, where he said, the Lord watched between you and me when we are out of one another's sight. I think that's a good thing. I mean, I think that's kind of like saying, the Lord bless you. He goes on to say, if you oppress my daughters, or if you take wives besides my daughters, although no one is with us, see, God is witness between you and me. Then Laban said to Jacob, see this heap and the pillar, which I have set between you and me? This heap is a witness, and the pillar is a witness, that I will not pass over this heap to you, and you will not pass over this heap and this pillar to me to do harm. The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac, and Jacob offered a sacrifice in the hill country and called his kinsmen to eat bread. They ate bread and spent the night in the hill country. Early in the morning, Laban arose and kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. And then Laban departed and returned home. There's a phrase there that I really like. He swore by the fear of his father Isaac. I get that he's talking about more about his respect for his father, and his father's he swears by his respect for his father, in his father's name. That is kind of interesting. Kind of makes me think of a time that's past, but a time when that used to be when concern for our father's reputation and our father's will was a big thing. I mean, was something that you didn't want to go against. Early in the morning, Laban arose and kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. And then Laban departed and returned home. So there's two more things that happened after this. The first part is there's a really weird, just kind of a passing comment in chapter 32 in the first two verses. Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's camp." So he called the name of that place Mahane. It's really in passing because nothing else is said about it. He goes on, and the main point of this section has to do with his reconciliation with Esau that we're going to look at in a minute. So I had to stop and ask myself, what does this mean? Why would the angels of God meet Jacob? And I look back and I remember God's promise that if Jacob would do as God had said, that God was going to be with him and God was going to work through him and he was going to bless him and he reiterated the promise that had been made to Abraham and to Isaac. And I can't see anything else but this being God. God came to him and said, it's time to go back to Canaan. And he got up and did it. And when Laban comes after him, it indicates that something you don't see when he's doing it. And that is, he does this at great risk. It is within Laban's ability to do great harm to Jacob. Jacob doesn't have a huge number of men. He has him and his wives, maybe some servants, but Laban has an army of workers and relatives to support him. So it's within his ability to do harm to Jacob, but God intervenes. And so when Jacob gets up and leaves, he is acting out of obedience to God and based on the promise that God has made him, and at great risk. I mean, it's not a risk if you trust God, but I'm saying that this is a difficult thing that he's doing. And the way it's told in the text, you don't see it unless you look closely, but it appears to me that the angels of God meet Jacob to let Jacob know that God is there, that God is with him, and all that he's doing, he has God's blessing and God's presence. And I think that God does that with us at times. I don't think it's quite as dramatic as angels walking up to us, but I do think that that God lets us know that he's with us in a variety of ways that are just sometimes they're only really useful for us. They're not really a proof of anything. They're just a way of God showing us that he's with us in what we're doing. In verses 3 to 12, we have this his preparation for Esau. Uh, Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother in the land of Seir, the country of Edom, instructing them, "Thus you shall say to my lord Esau, Thus says your servant Jacob, I have sojourned with Laban and have stayed until now. I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, male servants, and female servants. I have sent to tell my lord, in order that I may find favor in your sight." And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, "We came to your brother Esau, and he is coming to meet you, and there are 400 men with him." Now, if you're Jacob, remember when you left Canaan, it was because Esau wanted to kill you. And now he's coming to meet you with 400 men. And Jacob has no way to fight against 400 men. So Jacob is greatly afraid and distressed. He divides the people who are with him and the flocks and the herds and the camels into two camps, thinking, if Esau comes to the one camp and attacks it, then the camp that is left will escape. And Jacob said, "O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, return to your country and to your kindred, that I may do you good. I am not worthy of the least of all the deeds of steadfast love and all the faithfulness that you have shown to your servant. For with only my staff I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become two camps. Please deliver me from the hand of my father, or my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him that he may come and attack me, the mothers, with the children. But you said, I will surely do you good, and make your offspring as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude." So he stayed there that night, and from what he had with him, he took a present for his brother Esau, 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milking cows, camels, and their calves, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 male donkeys and 10 male donkeys. These he handed over, or female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. These he handed over to his servants, every drove by itself. And he said to his servants, "Pass on ahead of me, and put a space between drove and drove." He instructed the first, "When Esau my brother meets and asks you, 'To whom do you belong? Where are you going? And where are these ahead of you?' Then you shall say, 'They belong to your servant Jacob. They are a present sent to my lord Esau. And moreover, he is behind us.' And likewise he instructed the second and the third and all who followed the droves. You shall say the same thing to Esau when you find him. And you shall say, moreover, your servant Jacob is behind us, for he thought, I may appease him with the present that goes ahead of me, and afterward I shall see his face. Perhaps he'll accept me." So the present passed on ahead of him, and he himself stayed that night in the camp. So he comes up with this elaborate way of trying to appease his brother. And notice it's like in stages. So he's going to get one part of a gift, and then another gift, and then another gift, and then another gift. And each time he's going to be told this is time for him to come, as he gets all these gifts and realizes his brother's favor towards him and that he wants to honor him. Jacob is hoping that Esau will become more accepting of him and will actually accept him. It doesn't appear that any of this was needed. From what I can see in the story, I don't know that worked at all, because I don't think it needed to work. I think Esau had already been prospered by God and had come to be at peace with what had taken place. And then there's this last story, and I don't know Um, uh, it's about Jacob wrestling with God. By the way, in verses 22, he takes his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 children, and crosses the ford of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream and everything else that he had. And Jacob was left alone. And a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. And then he said, "Let me go, for the day is broken." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then he said, "Your name shall be no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed." And then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered." The sun arose upon him as he passed Penuel, limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the people of Israel do not eat the sinew of the thigh that is on the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip on the sinew of the thigh. Okay, I'm going to tell you that I have no idea why this is here. This has always eluded me in a sense. I understand what it says and I believe what it says. I don't understand exactly why it's here. There are some good points, though, that we can get from it. Jacob is ready. Jacob is wanting to be alone. Everything I read said probably he is wanting to spend some time in prayer. He does not, there's nothing that indicates in the text that he was alone so he could wrestle with an angel or a man. That appears to be brought on by the man, not by Jacob. If you look back at verse 24, Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. I read something today that was interesting. They said that he was wrestling in prayer. That's what he was talking about. It was a way of saying he wrestled with prayer. I don't think that's the case. That's not how it is written here. And he actually has a conversation with this man. So clearly, and this man is clearly appears to be God. So most commentators believe it's another incident where Jesus meets in the Old Testament, where an incarnation of God actually meets with Jacob, and they wrestle. So that's odd to me, I have to say, that they wrestle. And what is even odder is that he can't prevail against Jacob. Oh, I shouldn't say that. He did not prevail against Jacob. It doesn't say he can't. He ends up touching his hip socket and putting it out of joint as he wrestled with him. And so in order to end the match. But when he does it, Jacob won't let go. In a sense, Jacob has lost the wrestling match because he's of his hip, but he won't let the man go. And so the man says, "The day is broken, and I want you to let me go." And he says he won't do it unless the man blesses him. And again, we've talked about this before, but the greater blesses the lesser. So Jacob recognizes that someone greater than him is who he is with. And Jacob seems to understand that this is God from what we read after this. He asks him, "What is your name?" He asks Jacob, "What's your name?" And he says, Jacob. Then he said, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you've striven with God and with men and have prevailed. Now, I don't know if he's talking about the wrestling, but if you look back at Jacob's life, he's had this, he's been very strong-willed. He hasn't always sought God's advice on things that he did. And he has prevailed against men. But he says now, you're going to be called Israel. And Jacob asked him, please tell me your name. But he said, why is it that you ask my name? And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, saying, for I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered. He understands that he has been wrestling with the divine. We don't know. It's not just an angel, because angels were not divine and were not worthy of worship. And Jacob seems to actually believe this is God that he's seen. And he's not, there's nothing that indicates that that's not true. So that's why it's believed that he's talking about an incarnation of God. And so he's limping because of his hip. Possibly he limped the rest of his life. It would make some sense if because that would be a reminder to him. And still to that day, if in Genesis it says Israel does not eat the sinew of the thigh. So why is this here? He gets the blessing that he wanted, but he already was being blessed by God. Why? I'm going to unmute this. Yeah, you're right, Bill. I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Jacob is alone because he sent everyone else to face Laban first. The question is, why? It's at night. He has no intention at that point of traveling, and yet he, maybe I don't know, but it seems like he is wanting to be alone. Yes, he sent them to keep them apart from him. There's no doubt, but he's left alone there, and then he wrestles until daybreak. So doesn't seem to have anything.
It almost seems as though God came and wrestled with him to bolster his confidence.
It could be.
And Jacob realized who he was wrestling with and asked for the blessing because he knew the power of the blessing. So it's a reaffirmation of the promise.
And there's a lot of that in Jacob's life. Like I mentioned in the beginning of the chapter, the angels meeting him. No real explanation for why they're there, but Jacob gathers from that this God is here. That's what he gets out of it. That God is there with him, and here clearly God is with him, and I do absolutely, when I look at the passage, it looks to me like God initiates it, not Jacob. God is coming for him, not to beat him in a wrestling match, but maybe it is, as you say, to bolster his confidence. It certainly should do that. And then he wants a blessing. And God gives us what we need. And if Jacob gets all these reaffirmations, maybe Jacob needs all these reaffirmations. Um, I'm going to make a comparison. Although God was bountifully blessed Abraham and reiterated his promise to him numerous times, you don't see as many of these types of things happening. I guess you could look at offering Isaac as one of them, because even though it's an unpleasant experience, he walks away. He has to walk away from that reassured. So, he goes through a lot, Jacob does, but he follows through on the vow that he made to God, and God follows through with him and reaffirms in several ways that he's with him. So, that's pretty powerful. Any other comments or questions on this lesson? We're going to look at his meeting up with Esau next week, and what transpires. We're only going to spend another week on Jacob. We're going to move into the life of Joseph, who's the next patriarch that is so prominent in this whole scheme of God. Quiet night. If there are no other comments or questions, I'm going to wish you all a great week. And hopefully we'll all have a great week, and see some of you tomorrow night. Matt's got a class, 8 o'clock, and Don has a class Wednesday morning. I have a class Wednesday night, so I'll see some of you throughout the week. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Kerry.
Thank you, Kerry.
You're welcome.
It's a good class. Kept me writing.
Good night.
Good night.